Hello and welcome back to another Coriander Quilt Saturday. Today I'm going to be talking about stitching on the Abloom panel. I am also going to be sharing my Moda blockheads, blocks, and choosing the next works in progress number for all of you participating in our works in progress challenge. You'll have to wait and see what progress I made on my work in progress from last month. It's going to be fun to share, so stick around. I have all kinds of Abloom fabric goodness in front of me on my table today. Let's start off with those Moda blockheads blocks. This is the block that was released this past Wednesday. This is the Crossroads block, and it was brought to us by Lynn Hagmeyer of Kansas Troubles. I'm using Abloom for my blocks. This was a quick, easy, fun block to piece. I'm making just one most weeks. Some weeks I won't be making any of the pieced blocks at all. And then I'm also adding in my panel squares framed out to bring these up to 9.5 inches so that they measure the same as the pieced blocks that I am making. These patterns are free patterns over on the Moda blog, so I'll have that linked, and I'll link all of the information that's been shared so far for Moda blockheads. So if you are new to this, you can jump in. One thing I am finding to be very helpful, these patterns are written a little bit differently than I am used to. So I'm finding it to be helpful to write the cut measurements right on my little diagram here, rather than trying to reference this down here, because there are duplicates of letters, which makes sense as you start working through, but for my head, it gets a little bit confusing. So I have started just writing the measurements that I need for my pieces up in the diagram, and then referring to that instead of referring to these instructions down here. Some of you may find that helpful. Others of you may be happily following along with these instructions here. Whichever works for you. I'm a big proponent of making patterns work for you, doing things that simplify for your methods, using whatever tools, techniques you like using. We all approach things differently, and that includes how we read instructions. So make it easy for you. So that's how I approach the pattern. And then there's my block. There's the pressing on the back. Sometimes that can be helpful to see. I am definitely a press to the side gal, if at all possible. And that's what I did here. So that is this week's block. And we'll just go ahead and set these to the side. I am going to be spending a fair amount of time today talking about stitching on the Abloom panel. So while I have this block right here, we'll just put these two side by side. This block is partially stitched out. I've stitched this center portion in this orangey color here, and I've stitched the greens on the bottom portion here. So I still need to stitch up here at the top. This one is not stitched on at all. And as I said, I've gotten a lot of questions, primarily over in the Coriander Quilts Facebook group. So I wrote a post up over there and answered a lot of questions that I was seeing, and then I answered more questions that I received after I put that post up. And I thought I would share some of that information here, because I know a lot of you are stitching on the Abloom panel. If you got your Sew Sampler box this week, you might have, or within the last couple of weeks, you might have noticed something special in the newest Sew Sampler box, and that might be giving you even some more questions about the Abloom panel sampler. So I'm going to be just answering a bunch of questions today. But first off, I just wanted to show you the difference between a non-stitched block and a stitched block. So we'll set these to the side. And I am actually going to be stitching on this panel while I chat with you guys, because I need to get this done. And I keep putting it off, but it really needs to be done. So the first thing that keeps coming up is, how exactly do you stitch on this Abloom panel? So for those of you who might not be familiar with this panel, this is the panel that I designed to go along with my Abloom fabric line, which just got into quilt shops in April. I've talked about this a few different times here on the channel, showing how to cut apart the panel. I've mentioned that I am stitching on the panel, gave a couple tips, but I haven't gone into great detail about it here on the channel. So this is the panel. It's running yardage. It's regular 45-inch width. A 1 yard cut will give you 20 different of these little stitched motifs. So here's what it looks like. They're spaced really nicely to be able to fussy cut them apart and use them individually in projects, to use them individually in quilt patterns like my yesteryear quilt pattern here or handiwork over here. It works great for using in quilt patterns. It's also really fun to use in smaller projects. The one that I am stitching on right now, let me tug this back out without losing my thread. This one that I'm working on right now, I am going to be using in a panel project. I hope to share that next week. I had thought I might be able to share that with you today, but I just haven't gotten it stitched, and it needs to be stitched before it's ready to be sewn into that project bag. So really fun for those little individual projects, journal covers. You could even do pot holders or be really cute in aprons. Just all kinds of fun little things you can do with this panel. So pillows would be another great one. Lots of fun things. So that is the yardage of Abloom. So as I'm talking about this project and stitching on this, this is where it was cut from. I fussy cut one of the motifs into this little square here. It's the same thing that I'm doing for my Moda blockheads blocks, cutting them and then using them in the quilt block here. And then of course this one is going to be used in the project bag that I'm going to be sharing hopefully next week. But as I said, before we get into using it in a project bag, we need to get it stitched up. This is an optional step. These do not need to be stitched. They are beautiful without stitching, but it's fun to know that you have that option should you choose to use it. My ones that I have in the quilts are not stitched. The ones that I am using for my Moda blockheads blocks are not stitched. And I am going to do occasional projects stitching on them. So first up, we will talk a little bit about how I prepared my square for stitching. I like to use a lightweight fusible interfacing on the back when I am doing embroidery for projects. It adds a little bit of stability to your project. It makes your stitches lay just a little bit flatter without a lot of extra puckering. If you try to embroider on a piece of fabric without adding anything to the back, it tends to want to gather a little bit as you are stitching, and adding that interfacing just gives it a little bit more stability and lets your stitches lay a little bit nicer on your fabric. Additionally, if you have any loose tails on the back, it's going to help those from showing through in your completed project. So I added a lightweight fusible interfacing. Unfortunately, I don't remember exactly which one this is. I know it's a Pellon and I know it's a lightweight, but this is something I have had in my stash for so long, and it doesn't have any marking numbers, notations on it at all. So I can't say for certain which one it is, but it's a lightweight fusible interfacing. So you just iron it right onto the back of your project. I do this before I start stitching, and it is just to kind of stabilize that and for the reasons I just mentioned. So once I have cut my square, I cut my fusible the same size, I fuse those two together, and then I am ready to start stitching. Thread-wise, I do have, and I've mentioned my thread box a number of times in recent videos. This is in quilt shops now. Now it is just getting into quilt shops, so some of you have mentioned that you're having a little bit of a harder time trying to find this right now. Don't worry, it's not sold out. It's just slowly making its way into quilt shops. Shops can order it now, and as soon as Aurifil has the boxes ready, they'll be shipped out. This is not something like fabric that's going to sell out like you think of how fabric does. I actually have another thread box that I released quite a few years ago. I'm guessing probably 5 years ago, and you can still purchase that thread box. It's called Sunny Stitches if you want to take a look at that one. So a little bit different in fabrics in that it's not something you have to worry about selling out. Now these threads are 12 weight threads. And for those of you who might be more familiar with embroidery floss, it's a little bit of a different product. This is a single strand of heavier weight thread. It's not the multiple strands that embroidery floss comes in. So you are using just one strand. If you were to use embroidery floss for this same project, you would want to use at least 4 strands of embroidery floss, and potentially you would even want to go with all 6 strands of the embroidery floss to get the same look and thickness as you do from one strand of this 12 weight thread. So it is a little bit of a different product. I've used embroidery floss for embroidery. I've also used 12 weight thread or 8 weight thread for embroidery. Advantages to using the single strand of heavier weight thread is it doesn't tangle. I don't know if any of you are cross stitchers. I'm sure some of you are, but you know when you try to take a long piece of embroidery floss, if you start stitching, cross stitching with it, sometimes you'll just get a tangle mess at some point in time. And you oftentimes find that a smaller strand is going to work better for you when you're cross stitching. This sort of thread where it's just one strand doesn't have that same problem that sometimes occurs. So that is an advantage. And then the other thing that you might notice when you're stitching with a thread like this is that since you don't have multiple threads, they're going to lay nicer on your project. So if you have all 6 strands, you might have one strand kind of over top of another strand and they're just not laying as evenly. It's just fine. There's no reason not to use embroidery floss, just something to be aware of. As I said earlier, I'm a big proponent of using what works for you. If you've got embroidery floss sitting at home and you think, hey, I would like to try embroidering on the Abloom panel, there is absolutely no reason not to use the embroidery floss. It's whatever works for you, whatever supplies you have on hand. We as quilters can often make do with what we have, but it's nice to know why someone might prefer one over the other or vice versa. So a little bit about the thread. Some of you might be familiar with a Valdani thread, or there's one called Finca Presencia. Those are both these heavier weight threads. Those I think are tend to be both 8 weight threads, which is a little bit heavier than the Aurifil 12 weight, but very similar and often used for similar purposes. Embroidery, hand quilting. I love using 8 weight or 12 weight thread for hand quilting. If you've watched my hand quilting series of videos here on YouTube, it is this 12 weight thread that I am using. If I remember correctly, it's the 12 weight thread I'm using for that video, but I also mentioned the 8 weight because I use both of them a lot. They're just so nice for hand quilting when you want those big stitches with that very visible chunky thread for your hand quilting. It works beautifully. So, and then before I actually answer more questions about the thread, I think I'm just going to talk a little bit more about actually stitching on this panel. So once you have your panel cut, prepared with your interfacing, you've decided on your thread, you are ready to start stitching. And I stitch this exactly as I would stitch cross stitch, where I'm doing all of my stitches that go from top left to bottom right across, and then I'll go back over and cross all of those going the other direction. And I'm stitching right on the printed motif, one stitch at a time. Well, 1/2 of a stitch at a time because I'm doing just those halves. So it's kind of relaxing. Definitely not a fast thing to do, but if you like to wind down in the evenings with a little Netflix or sit out, it's finally warm enough in Ohio that we can sit outside, sit outside in the evenings and unwind a little bit. This is kind of a fun project to have. The needle that I'm using is an embroidery needle. It's probably a size 7 or a size 9. I'm not sure exactly which size it is. Typically what I suggest, I use embroidery needles for hand quilting also. They have a longer shaft and the eye is a little bit, it's long and narrow as opposed to, you know, round and fat, which is what I prefer for either of those, hand quilting or embroidery. What I would usually say to someone who's not quite sure what size needle they want is to buy one of the multi-packs. This is the John James needle, embroidery needle, and like I said, either a size 7 or 9. I think a 7 because that eye is pretty teeny for my aging eyes. But just try, you can get the multi-packs, try out some different sizes. What you're looking for is an eye that's easy to thread. And then if you're hand quilting with it, you want a longer shaft, which the embroidery needles have. So that's why I tend to just grab an embroidery needle. It also has a pointy tip, which is different from cross stitching. With cross stitching, we're using those more blunt end tips, and we want the pointiness of an embroidery needle for embroidery. So that's what I'm using. And you can pick up needles pretty easily. Those John James needles are easy to find online. I purchased mine in my local quilt shops, which many quilt shops will carry needles, especially if they also carry any kind of handwork supplies. they'll also have a nice selection of tools to use for that. So I'm just stitching across. I'm not hooping. You can hoop. That was one of the questions that came up. I'm not hooping, but you certainly can. And I have given myself a nice border around my motif so that after I'm done, I can trim this up a little bit. It's going to fray a little bit as you're working with it, but it will fray less if you've added that fusible interfacing. So it'll fray a little bit, but since I've given just a little bit of extra space around my motif here, I can trim up this block and trim away some of those little frazzles that are going to naturally occur as you are working with this fabric. So I have stitched half of my stitches all the way across that first row, and now I'm just going to go back and cross them going the other direction. And I'm trying to stay as close as possible on the colored little X's there. They're printed right on there, so it makes it really nice to do so. I thought I felt you being squirrely back there. There we go. You just stay right on those little prints and then just keep going. Hello, future Cori here in my fancy working at the computer outfit, sweatpants. I am very fancy today as I am chatting with you. So as Ryan was editing today's video, he realized that I just did not do a very good job getting my project underneath our overhead camera so that you could really see when I was talking about the technique of stitching on this Abloom panel. And additionally, I saw some other questions pop up over in my Facebook group after I filmed my video, and I thought, well, I can just address some of those too if we add in a little technique-based insert into this video. So that's what we're going to do. So I have cut a new panel square. I've chosen this basket block from my Abloom panel, cut it to 7.5 inches, which allows me a little bit of room to trim that down. I do have those few videos that I've chatted about already where I show how to cut the blocks. So if you need any help with cutting, be sure to reference those videos. And then I have also fused my lightweight fusible interfacing to the back. So it is ready to be stitched on. And then I also wanted to show you this block here. As you continue watching the video, you're not going to see this completed later on because I'm still stitching on it. But after I finished the video, I did finish stitching. So this is what this block looks like, all stitched up. And then this is what the block looks like on the back. I don't think I shared a lot of back information, so I wanted to show you what that looks like. So that's the back, and then again, the front, once it has been stitched on, versus this guy here who has no stitching. So if you are a cross stitcher, this is going to feel familiar to you, a little bit different, but familiar. If you are new to embroidery or have never cross stitched, this is going to be new. So I did want to take a little bit more time to show these techniques. I have threaded several needles in my different colors of thread. I have a green color, an aqua color, and then the coral color. And these are all threads from the Abloom thread box you can see laid out here. And then I have the gray tannish color that I would use for this basket portion of this basket block. I also grabbed, I had mentioned in this video at some point in time about the niceness of using a multi-pack of needles, and I grabbed one that I had on hand. This allows you to try out different needles for embroidery. There is really no right or wrong needle to use. It's just whatever needle works best for you. Using a multi-pack such as this one allows you to try out a lot of different needles. So I just grabbed 3 different ones and threaded my needles because nobody wants to see me take time threading needles. I need to get readers at my age and I just have not done so. Okay, so we have our needle threaded with the green thread. The first thing we want to do is put a knot onto the end of our needle. You can do this however you want to. I like to do a quick quilter's knot. You can find tutorials on how to do a quilter's knot, but essentially you take your needle. I have it in my right hand, needle sharp end pointing up. I'm going to point that at my left hand. I lay my thread right on top of my needle, so it's laying right on top, and then I take the thread about 3 times around my needle, point my needle back up, grab where I have wrapped around my needle, and then just pull it up. and that makes a little knot right there in the end of your thread. The tail is a little bit longer than I'm going to need, so I will trim that down, but for right now, that works perfect. And I am going to start stitching right here on this very topmost X. When you stitch these, you're going to stitch half of the stitch first. And let me get a little more comfortable here. I'm going to be poking around. Okay, so you're going to come up right on the top left corner of your little stitch mark, pull your thread through till it hits the knot, and then you're just going to cross over to that bottom side, right like that. And then pull your thread down through. And you're not going to want to pull this super tight. You're just wanting it to lay nice and flat right there on your fabric. You don't want it to gather, you just want it to lay snug against. And then you're going to do the same thing, but in the opposite direction. So you're going to put your needle up right there at the tip of that little marked line. Bring that up through, and then you're going to cross and do another stitch right there. And that's what your first stitch will look like. It just lays right on top there. This is what the back of your project looks like so far. Then you'll just go down to your next row, and you're going to repeat what I did. We have 2 stitches here. So you're going to start up here, top left, run a stitch down to the bottom right. I'm going to stitch that, then I'll hold that up to the camera a little bit. So you can see I've made 1 stitch there. And then I am going to stitch the next half, top left, bottom right. That's what that looks like. And now we go back and we cross those. So it's a little bit different from the stitches in cross stitch, not the technique, but the fact that our stitches don't share holes. When you're cross stitching, your stitches will share holes. These are each individual stitches stitched right here, like so. And then we'll get the next one. We're crossing. Oh, there we go. And then we stitch that one down. So we have the first 3 stitches done, and you'll just continue in that manner, stitching half of your stitch at a time. Right on the marked X's, working our way from left to right to start. This is a little bit harder for me to do when I have to hold it up to the camera, but I think you can see nicely how this works. So I'm doing all of those stitches left to right, just like you would for cross stitch, and then coming back over and stitching those stitches across. All right, I'm going to finish these here, show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to show you how to end. We're going to pretend that we are ready to change colors, and we want to end this color and start a new color. There we go. Okay, here is what the back of this looks like at this point in time. The little tail from my knot that I'll trim down later, and then our few stitches that we've made so far. Now, if we wanted to stop this color and switch to a different color, we can knot off our thread right now and then switch to a new color. So what we're going to do is I am going to run my loose end of the thread here underneath these stitches right here. I'm going to do that once, and then I'm going to come back around and do the same thing again, running that right under those loose threads. And this time, I'm going to put my needle up through that little loop end that your tail makes as it pulls through. And then I'm going to pull that tight, and then I'm going to go through and do that again. And that's just going to make a little knot right there on the back of your project. And then you can snip that end off. And then you're ready to change to another color. And that's what that'll look like on the back. My knot is a little bit messy, but you can see other knots that I've done over here. So here's a little knot right here. There's a little knot right up here. Where else? There's one right there, it looks like, where I needed to add more thread to complete that color. So you just have these little knots on the back of your project. There's a couple more there. So that's what those are going to look like. Then you are ready to switch to a new color. So we're just gonna pretend we want to do the aqua. I'm gonna start up here with aqua. I'll show you how to make that quilter's knot again. So I have my needle pointing up. I'm going to point it this direction, grab the tail of my thread, lay it right on my needle. I'm wrapping away from myself about 3 times, and then I'm going to grab that and then just slide this all the way down the length of my thread. And then there is my little knot. And then we're ready just to repeat right here. So I'm coming up, whoops, there we go. I'm coming up on that first line of the aqua color. Going to come down right there where it's marked. We'll do that again. Right there. And then cross over. And then you'll just repeat. You keep working your way down these rows, this row and then this row. If you have enough thread, you can then continue on to this little chunk of aqua. And then once you've completed your aquas, you'll just knot off and then you are ready to start a new color. If you would happen to run out of thread in the middle of your project, I think I saw one of those here. Let me look. I thought I had one. I don't see any right off though, but if you happen to run out of thread in the middle, so say you're stitching this big gray section here and you run out of thread somewhere in the middle, you would just knot off your thread, secure it by running under a few stitches first, and then make a little knot, and then you can rethread your needle and then continue going. And that secures your threads and allows you to change colors or to continue stitching if you have run out of thread. And that is how I approach stitching these. Now we will go back to your regularly programmed video. There's some more good information that I'm going to be sharing, but I did just want to give you a quick little more in-depth, easier to see, hopefully easier to see tutorial on exactly how the technique of stitching on these panels works. And that is all you do. Stitch across, and then you're just going to go down and do the next row, stitching to your heart's content. And it's just sort of fun and relaxing, but it does take a bit of time. All right, I'm going to grab some of my other information I shared here and answer some of these questions. Let me see. As far as purchasing the boxes online, locally, quilt shops can order it right now. So if you have an online shop or a local shop you would like to support, you can pop in and ask them to purchase a box for you. I talked about the weight of thread. Let's open this up here. So this is my little box I'm working from now. So far I have used the green here and then this orangey coral color here. And these are the other colors that are included in the box. So the box colors, I pulled colors that would work no matter what project you would want to be using with your Abloom fabrics, not necessarily specifically for the panels. So while it does include all the colors you need to stitch the panel, you can see, you know, we have a nice dark gray here, the greens you've seen, we have a light gray. Oh, let me get that better in the frame. A light gray here. We have aqua, we have a light orangey coral color. So it definitely has all the colors that you need for the panel, but then it also has other colors that you might find yourself wishing for if you were doing maybe hand quilting or embroidery of some other project, or just wanting to add cute stitching to, you know, whatever you're working on as you're working with the Abloom fabric. So there is a yellow, because as you can see, yellow mixes beautifully with this collection. And then there is also just a cream, because sometimes when you're hand quilting, it's so nice just to have a neutral blendable color. So I included that in there. The aqua, the light gray, the light corally orange, and then there are 3 other darker grays that you can choose from. So it makes it really versatile for a multitude of projects, not just for the panel. So those are the colors. I have in the Etsy listing all of the colors that are included in this box typed up in the description. And actually, I'll include that here in the description box of this video so that you have those numbers handy. Because if you want to pick them up individually, you can, or if you want to use a conversion chart and use maybe a DMC, I'll have that conversion chart linked as well. I don't think there is an exact DMC for all of the grays. So you might find yourself just picking up just one of those darker grays, or maybe a slightly different lighter gray. I don't remember exactly which ones have great equivalents for DMC, but there's some that aren't as easily readable in DMC. But I will put that conversion chart down there so you can take a look at that, and that way you have that information. Okay, what else? Oh, this was another question I saw coming up. Comments about how expensive the Aurifil threads are. But I think what some people might not be considering is that in order to do this sort of a project and achieve the same look, you need to use so many more strands of DMC than you might be used to. So to achieve this look, you'd want to use at least 4. And I even saw someone using all 6 strands, and I probably, if I was doing it, would use 6 strands. So all 6 strands of DMC, as opposed to maybe the 1 or 2 strands that you're used to for cross stitch. When you're just using 1 or 2 strands, those skeins of embroidery floss go really far, but when you're using all 6 of them, or even 4 to 6 strands, it doesn't go as far. So there is, I had to look this up because I wasn't sure. On one thread, one of these spools, there is 54 yards of thread, and a skein of embroidery floss has 9. So there's about 6 times more if you're using all 6 strands of DMC for a project such as this. And the price is about 6 times more too. So it actually, when you think about it that way, is pretty equivalent. If you would be using it for something different, thinking about it in cross-stitch terms, then yes, DMC embroidery floss is the way to go, because it's definitely more economical. The other thing too is you need to consider how much thread you're actually going to be using. You might not need 54 yards of thread, and in that case, a skein of embroidery floss is going to be more economical for you. The other thing to consider is, do you actually need all of these colors in this box? And that will also help you determine as to whether thread box or purchasing individual embroidery floss is maybe more economical for you. But yeah, something I wanted to point out, because yes, when you think about just one spool of thread, I think these are around, I don't know, $5 something to $6 for one spool of this thread, whereas you're looking maybe 75 cents or so for an embroidery floss, maybe even cheaper than that. Of course, prices are going to vary a little bit depending on where you're purchasing from, but when you just look at just those 2 numbers, of course you would think, my goodness, I'm just going to get embroidery floss. But depending on the purpose and what you want it to look like, there are a couple more things to consider. So I wanted to mention that. Okay, and then I had some other questions come up in regard to some other things. So long arming. Someone asked me, do long arm quilters mind long arming like a whole edge to edge pattern on top of embroidery like this? Now, this is something you would want to check with your long arm quilter. I had asked one of mine, I don't remember which one, several years ago, because I've done different embroidered projects in my quilts. And whoever I asked didn't mind long arm quilting over embroidered pieces, but I can't say that that's going to be the same for all long arm quilters. And I would certainly want you to make sure that if you're considering doing a whole quilt with embroidery, first off, check with your quilter. Second off, make sure that you aren't loosey-goosey with your stitching. If you have a bunch of loose stitches that poke up, you know, if you're, I'm going to exaggerate this, but if you have something that a foot can get caught on, it could be problematic. So something to be aware of when you're stitching. There is a YouTube video that I came across that was talking about machine embroidering and the potential for long arm quilting over top of that. And that long arm quilter didn't mind machine embroidering, but it's a little bit different than hand embroidery. So yeah, I would just check with your quilter and see how comfortable they are with it and if they have any additional tips or tricks that they would share with you. That would be helpful for you to know. Someone wondered if the whole box will do a 1 yard panel. And I would think so, for sure, if you're using all of the colors. But if you are picking and choosing and matching exactly to what you have on the panel, I would still think so, but I haven't tested it out to be 100% certain that that would be the case. I think so, but I can't say for sure. And then I talked about hooping. So I think those were all of the questions that I answered, and then the additional questions that I had. If you have more questions about this, maybe you're a long armer and you can weigh in. I don't want to steer anybody wrong on long arm quilting if you're choosing to do this on a whole project. Of course, custom quilting, you can work around the motifs, but if you're specifically wanting an edge-to-edge long arm quilting sort of deal, if you are a long arm quilter, I'd love to hear your opinions on that, because that would be helpful for all of us. And then if anyone has any additional questions that you want answered, let me know and I'll do my best to answer. I'm not going to know all the things, but we can kind of crowdsource some of our answers, which is really helpful. Okay, well, I didn't make it very far. I made 1 row. I had thought maybe I would keep chatting and then, you know, magically I would have enough time to get some more stitches done, but here we are ready to move on to my next topic, and I didn't get as far as I wanted, but I will keep working on that so that I can share the project bag with you guys, hopefully next week. Now, we are going to move on to works in progress. Did you guys get yours done? Oh, before I start on this, I can give you a garden update. First of all, thank you so much for all of your helpful information about raccoons. That was really interesting to read down through and hear all of your opinions about raccoons. We've seen him twice since the last video. Once he was out on our porch and my husband ran him off, just scared him away, and he went running for the woods. And then the other thing is my husband set up a trail camera on our garden so we can see who visits our garden. He visited, he did kind of a walk by, but he didn't give any trouble. But we had some other visitors. We had deer. I don't know if it was, I didn't ask him if it was just 1 deer or more than 1 deer, but they also perused our garden and they stopped for a little nibble. Now I saw the nibble. I could see where one of Chloe's plants had a little nibble off the top. I don't remember which plant it was. And then there was 3 leaves laying on the ground beside her plant. So that was encouraging to me because they didn't eat the leaves. So they probably didn't like it. I'm hoping that's what that means. They didn't like it. They're not going to be back and they're going to carry on their merry way. But aside from that, so we're a week in from when I last talked about our little vegetable garden, and things are still mostly there with the exception of those 3 leaves. I haven't looked this morning yet, so I'm hoping that's still the case today. I'll keep you guys updated. We are talking about maybe having to put like just a little fence around to keep out some of the things that wouldn't keep out the raccoon. So I'm not sure about that. We'll see what happens, but so far We're doing okay. I think Eleni said we've basically just made a little deer salad bar out there, so I'm hoping that's not the case, but I'll keep you updated. All right, works in progress. Last month, what was our number? Number 5. Number 5 was our number. I'm not sure what your number 5 on your list would have been, but my number 5 was make a bag using one of the lines you skipped. So I like making patchwork bags with my fabric lines, and for a while I had been really good about doing one pretty much every line. If you want to see some of those bags I've made previously, let me know, because that'd be kind of fun to share. I don't even remember all the ones I've made. I would just make them when a new line came out and then take it along to Quilt Market with me or use it here. There's some that I definitely use a lot. I made an Amy Butler weekender bag using sun drops, and that is such, if you've made one or if you've seen one, those are such nice roomy bags that I will use that as a carry-on when I travel, and it fits great in the overhead compartment. It's cute, fits a lot of items, and works great. So that one has gotten a lot of use. That might be my favorite one I've made. I'm not sure. It was also the hardest one I made. But yeah, let me know if you'd want to see some of those bags that I've made. So here's what happened this past month. I was trying to decide what bag I wanted to make, and then I remembered, hey, not too long ago, you had ordered supplies to make a bag. I don't even remember which fabric line it was for, but I knew I had it. So I went and grabbed it. It's in this package right here. Today, before I started filming this, I looked at the date on this mailing label. It is September 4th of 2020. So quite a bit longer than I would have expected. But it has, you're already noticing, aren't you, that this bag is not in bag form yet. But it has all of the supplies to make a bag. And I thought, well, I could just make that bag. I've got everything I need here. I don't even know what all it has. I started pulling all of this stuff out. I was trying to think, it might have been Cozy Up based on the color of my zippers, and 2020 would have been, I mean, it could have been apricot and ash. I don't know. Maybe it was apricot and ash. Now I'm second guessing myself. I had been thinking Cozy Up, but 2020 might have been apricot and ash, which means I could easily do an Abloom. I mean, this would be really pretty with these Abloom fabrics, this color, right? Look at that. It would fit right in with those. Okay, so now I have to think what fabric line I would use. I still plan to make this bag, but here's where we're at right now. So I'm pulling out supplies, pulling out all my things. It's got like the hardware. This is from Knot and Thread. She does great bag patterns, and you can also buy everything you need in kit form, which is wonderful for me because I just definitely don't ever have bag making supplies on hand. When it says any sort of metal bracket, I don't even know what terms they use. Well, here, let me look. So it'll say sew in magnetic snaps, metal snaps. I see things like that, and I know I am not going to have what I need on hand. So I love that she does kits. This is the bag pattern. I'm going to take it out of the plastic here. It's called the Truvy bag, and it is one that has all of these see-through interior organizers, I guess you would call it, little pockets, pouches within the bag itself. And I thought this would be wonderful for any number of things. So I remember thinking it when I bought it, and oh, see, helpful supplies, metal snap plier tool. I don't have that. So I will be trying to figure that step out as I go. So what I did is I opened up my pattern, opened up all my supplies. I'm like, okay, I am all great, ready to go. I started leafing through this pattern, and my brain started going a little crazy because it's a lot of instructions. And I was looking through and I thought, oh, I don't even know. There's so many words and this is gonna take me so long. And so I looked through it about that quick and was like, it's a lot of words, a lot of instructions, a lot of illustrations and pictures. And I tucked it back in to the bag and I promptly put everything back in this bag. So that's how far my works in progress bag went for last month. I still want to make this. Maybe I'll get it done this month. I don't know. It's so nice. I wonder if this is the same lightweight interfacing that I am using. Hold on just a second. Okay. I'm going to compare these two. They could almost be the same. And I wonder if they are. Okay, so this one still has all of the paper. So this is what I have used. This is mine that I'm using on the back of these. And it feels very similar. So even if it's not exactly the same, you could certainly use whatever this is. So this is Pellon SF101 Shape Flex. You could use this. I'm not sure that it's exactly the same. I mean, the weave looks slightly different. This feels a little maybe more lightweight, not quite as much body as this one has. So it might not be exactly the same. So do with that information as you want. I don't know if that's helpful to know or not. I just know people have been asking and I just don't know what this is. I think this is a little heavier weight. So it's probably not SF101, but it's close. It's close. Okay, so hopefully I will get my bag pattern made and we'll have a bag before too long. The next thing I need to do is, oh, let me know if you had better luck. Did you just look at your project and think, okay, I'm just going to put that off? Did you make a little bit of progress? Or none at all? None at all, a little bit, or all of it. I didn't even give you the all of it option. Let us know. Okay, next number. Let's see what we get this month. See what happens. Okay. My number is, it's going to be this one. Number 7. Let go of a project you aren't excited to finish. And I have just a project. Okay, so this is how this is going to work. This is number 7. Let go of a project you aren't excited to finish is what my prompt was for my number 7. Your number 7 is going to be something different. We're going to do a giveaway, and I have just the item. I had 2 numbers still left on my sheet that are let go of a project you aren't excited to finish. And so I thought that could happen. And so I pulled one. We're going to do a giveaway. This will be a giveaway over on my blog. And this is a table runner. Oh, here's apricot and ash. It is just an apricot and ash and a bloom sort of day today, isn't it? This was a table runner that I had made when I was making my, it was Beautiful Day mystery block of the month. It's been a few years, and I made blocks both in Beautiful Day and then also in apricot and ash. And so then I sewed 3 of my blocks together into this table runner option as part of that sew along. So I still have this table runner. I am not going to finish it, and I would be real happy to send this on its way to somebody else. So I'm going to set up a giveaway. It'll be on my blog, CorianderQuilts.com, starting today. And I'll put all of the instructions to enter over on that giveaway. So you'll visit the CorianderQuilts.com blog. I will have a link in the description box below this video so that you can navigate yourself over there, and you'll need to leave a comment on today's blog post. I'll leave this open for a little while. I'll have the exact dates listed over there. I'll decide how long I want to leave the giveaway open. Usually I leave it open for about a week or so. And then have those dates posted, and then I will share the winner over on the blog also. So we will just let this project move on to a new home. And if you like these blocks, these patterns are still available over on the blog. I've been getting a few questions here and there about how does the apricot and ash or Beautiful Day panel compare to this panel here, and these are designed to be cut smaller. So you'll remember I shared a little bit about various sizes we can cut these at, but probably what's going to work best is cutting it a little smaller and then adding a white border to bring it up to the same size as these panel squares. So if you wanted to utilize these Abloom panel squares within some of my projects that require a larger center, like this one, for example, use them, just add a border and then trim the whole thing down to whatever size the pattern tells you to use for this right here. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, they're versatile. You just have a little bit of a workaround if you wanted to use the smaller Abloom squares in place of these larger apricot and ash squares. So there's that table runner again, and you can go and enter that giveaway. And that wraps up today's video. If you have questions about anything I shared today, don't hesitate to leave those in the comments below. I'll do my very best to answer those for you. And I'm hoping to have that patchwork bag video ready to go up. Not this one, but the tutorial that I'm going to be sharing using this little guy. I hope to have that video up next Saturday. And then Saturday after that is already our Callie & Co. Mystery Block of the Month. So 2 fun Saturdays coming up. I hope your summer has been going fantastically as well. And I thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend here at Coriander Quilts. I thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you again next time.